Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today we are going to take a look at the Musician Draco R2R digital to analog converter. This lists at a variety of retailers for $750 US. It is a fully balanced design, and this was sent to me by Arthur from Power Holdings Inc., who is a US distributor of the Musician brand. And so it has been here in my house for a while, okay? And so I'm finally getting around to do the review of it, so thanks to Arthur for sending this and for being so patient. I don't get to keep it to my knowledge. It will be going back at some point. Hopefully I'll be able to hang on to it a little bit longer because I have a string of similarly priced DAC models, particularly R2R models, coming up that I would like to be able to compare this to. So fingers crossed that that will happen. All right. But if it doesn't, I've had it for a while. I understand. Okay, I will send it back and do the best I can with the comparisons otherwise. Now, if you see denafrips in this design, there are reasons for that, and there has been some controversy, if you will, about the relationship between musician and denafrips, and so I will also address that here in the course of this review as well. So stick around for that. All right, so let's go ahead and do shameless self-promotion, then we'll come back on the other side and talk about the Musician Draco. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. Let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room business out of the way here first, okay? So many people will look at this piece and they will see a denafrips design, and that makes sense. There has been a school of thought out there in our audiophile community that the Musician brand is just a ripoff of denafrips, right? They are close to denafrips clones. I talked to Arthur at Power Holdings about this, and then I also asked Alvin Chi at denafrips about this issue too. And I got a couple of different responses here. And I'm going to say that I'll just sum it up this way. I am not entirely sure what is going on between denafrips and Musician. I don't think it is necessarily shady. And I trust Arthur at Power Holdings. My dealings with him have been very positive, and so I think he's a good guy. And I don't think that he would knowingly get into business with some shady characters. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just have no reason to suspect that from Arthur at all. Okay, because again, my dealings with him have been wonderful. And so, here it is. What Arthur at Power Holdings told me is that the company that puts the name Musician on these is both the ODM and OEM designer and builder of the products themselves, okay? Both for the Musician brand and for denafrips. As Arthur explains it, Alvin Chi of denafrips takes that basic design, makes some tweaks to it, puts his own spin on it, and then the company behind the Musician brand, I don't know the name of that company, does the actual building and manufacturing of the denafrips products. So while there will be similarities there, that doesn't mean that they are exactly the same thing. There are slight differences here and there. I can see slight differences in the build, and I can also see, and I have been told that there are slight differences in the sound. Now, unfortunately, I do not have the denafrips Aries 2 in-house to compare this directly to, because this, given price and design, looks to me like it is the Musician equivalent of the denafrips Aries 2. I do have the denafrips Aries 12th anniversary edition in. It literally just arrived here on the day that I filmed this video. And it's a little bit different. Like, its build is different. It's a little bit of a redesign and all of that than this. So this is, I think, again, more like comparative directly to the Aries 2. Now, I did ask Alvin Chi of denafrips to confirm what Arthur had told me. His answer to that question was basically, it's complicated, that he signed an NDA and can't talk about it. And then he gave me a link to an article that's over on Draco's website, and I will link to that article down below in the description of this video as well. And honestly, that didn't clear things up very much. If anything, that muddied the waters a little bit more for me. However, one thing that was confirmed by the Draco article is that it is fairly common practice for there to be non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, between companies that put their brand name on a thing and the OEM/ODM providers of those things. So there is some sort of a written agreement between musician and Denafrips. I don't know exactly what it is, but whatever it is, there's apparently some legally binding agreement going on. So I'm going to leave it there. I have, again, I also trust Arthur's judgment here. He has given me no reason not to. And then I'm also going to go ahead with the review here because I think some people are going to be out there and they're going to see this resistor ladder R2R fully balanced DAC for $750, and and it decodes pretty much everything that they might need it to decode. More on that in a moment. And they're going to be very interested in it and want to know what it sounds like and want to be able to make a good decision. So I'm going to do what I feel my job as a reviewer here is to do, and that is to inform said people like that so that they can make good decisions with their money. Part of that informing is just to tell you what I know about the situation between Denafrips and Aries, and I have just done that. That is what I know. I will leave it up to you to decide whether or not you want to throw your money in the direction of musician, since they have been the ones seen as the ones doing the ripoff, which again, may not be fair, probably isn't entirely fair, okay? So, but I will still leave it up to you, the viewer, to decide whether you want to throw your money that way. And then from here on out, then I will just treat this as any other review that I have done and do my best job to inform you about how well this is built and what it sounds like. All right, so shall we get into that? Sure, let's get into that. Okay, build and features. So again, a resistor ladder design, fully balanced. There's an R2R DAC array in each channel here. And then decoding options. It will basically decode all things two-channel audio save MQA. That is about the only acronym of sound decoding for two-channel audio that I can't throw in there on this one, because it does PCM up to like 32-bit and what, 1536 kilohertz or something like that, and DSD all the way up to 1024, just, you know, astronomically large numbers on that there. Okay, it is well built. It has an aluminum metal chassis here. It has a brushed aluminum faceplate here on the front. There is a large toroidal transformer in here, and so the unit has quite a bit of heft to it. Okay, it is rock solid in its build. All right, so let's go ahead and do a unit tour then. So here's the front panel, pretty simple. What we see here on it is we get three buttons, a power button here, and then an input selector button, and then a switch between the oversampling and non-oversampling modes. So either oversampling or NOS as you hear it. There are a string of LEDs. It's hard to see here with it not lit up, but here, and then also here. And so the way this works is that you get a little tiny red LED above each of the input options, so you know which input you're on. You get a little tiny red LED above the power button, so you can tell when it's powered on. You get a little tiny red LED above the NOS/OZ switch, okay, so that you can see when that's on. When it's on, it's in NOS mode. And then this is interesting here. You see this 44.1K and then 48K right by it. There's a light that goes with those. And then we have a multiplier, 1x, 2x, 4x, okay, and then DSD. So if you're running, say, a 96 kilohertz PCM signal through this, what's going to happen here is that the 48K is going to light up, and then the 2X indicator light is going to light up. And the way that works is you take the 48 kilohertz, multiply it by 2x, 96 kilohertz, okay? And that's how you can tell the sampling rate on this. Okay, back panel. We have, okay, RCA stereo single-ended outputs here. Here are the balanced 3-pin XLR outputs. We have an I2S digital audio input next to a coaxial SPDIF input here with an RCA connector, a Toast-Link SPDIF optical input, an AES EBU 3-pin XLR SPDIF digital input, and then the USB connector for a USB input, and then the input for the power cord right there. Okay, so you get both balanced and single-ended outputs. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digital inputs on this. Okay, so it's fairly fleshed out in terms of its connectability here. The one issue I have here is with the I2S input. It's right between these two RCA plugs here. And you can see these RCA plugs, like they are big and thick, right? And they stick out from the chassis a long ways. And just these two are close together. So if you have a really thick termination on your I2S cable, which is basically just an HDMI cable, you might have trouble getting it in there, particularly if you also need to plug something into either of these inputs. So that spacing could have used a little bit of work, I think. There. Now, on the subject of that I2S input, there are, I believe, 8 different I2S protocols that this DAC has in it, that you can use a combination of button pushing from the 3 buttons on the front panel. It's in the owner's manual how to do this, but you can do some keystroke combinations here to cycle through the different I2S modes, because unfortunately I2S is not yet a standardized protocol in the audio industry, and a bunch of different companies do it slightly different ways with their pinout assignments. But with 8 different modes, you can find the one here most likely that will accommodate whatever device you're using that has an I2S output. Some DAPs have those, many I2S like my Canon N6 Mark II does. Many DDCs have an I2S output on it, and a lot of streamers have those these days too. So that might be something that you are interested in there. Now, the other thing here is these feet on the bottom are also kind of big or tall. And so if this is sitting on your desk or anything, like it's easy to roll a pencil under there or something like that and lose it for a while, particularly if you have things stacked on top of this. So I don't know why the feet needed to be so tall. There really isn't any air intake under here for cooling or cycling, or cycling of air or anything. It's just tall. Don't really know why. It is a bit unusual, but whatever. It is what it is. One thing to note while we're here on the sound as well is the output level of the Draco is unusually low. At least I think it's unusually low. It's definitely lower than the Bifrost 2, for example. Like, reading it from my screen from across the room here, like the PCM output voltage from the balanced output here is 2.8 volts from the XLR output, and then 1.4 volts from the RCA output. And those drop to 2 volts and 1 volt respectively if it's decoding DSD. So I don't know why this is. It's a fixed output level, but it's just lower than like the standard, 4 volts and 2 volts for balanced and single-ended connections from a lot of DACs. So that might be something that affects your system. It might not be. It's just something that to keep in mind if you're in the market for this DAC. Okay, sound? Sure, let's talk about sound. Test gear is going to take a minute here because this has been in my house probably since December, and we're about to roll over to March here. So, I mean, it's been in my system for a while. And what I did with it is I have my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, which I use for all of my critical listening and well, not all of, but for a lot of my critical listening and all that. It is my reference DAC. But then I also keep a secondary DAC on my desk, which when I don't have one in for testing is usually the Schiit Bifrost 2/64. which is connected to my computer via optical and USB and all of that, and it just kind of handles everyday sounds and everything, system sounds. If I need something quick, you know, without having to fire up the whole rig or anything, like that's what that DAC is for. So I swapped the Bifrost 2/64 out for the Draco, and it was just kind of that in the background workhorse DAC for a while as I was getting accustomed to its sound and things of that nature. And then here within the last handful of weeks, I really dived into critical listening of it because I was able to, for one, because I've had a ton of gear in that I also had to get reviews out for. Okay, so that being said then, the sources for this would have been, for just general listening, as I said, I connected it via fiber optic digital to the motherboard of my Windows 10 PC. It was connected via USB to the same PC. And then most of the digital inputs on it, the AES, the I2S, the coaxial, and all of that, they were all used at some time, some way, either from my Singer SU2 DDC or from the iFi Neo Stream that I have in here as well, which was used as a Rune endpoint. Frequently and all that, and then also like the Singer SU2 would have been frequently used with Ottervana from my PC. So then playing local files either directly from my PC or through Rune on my home network here, or lossless file stream from Qobuz. Amplifiers that would have been plugged into this at one time or another. Single-ended amps would include my KN-HA1A Mark II, the Erzatich Perfidus amplifier. I'm looking over at my desk to remember all of these. I also had it plugged into my desk speaker setup, which is currently a Parasound ZoneAmp V3, driving a pair of Yamo C93 Mark II speakers, and then there's also a subwoofer rigged up to that, which is kind of a chimera at this point, because I had a Polk subwoofer that the amplifier died, so I bought an outboard amp, and it's all very complicated, but yeah, it works. Okay, so that was running there. So that was at least a smattering of the single-ended connections that this had. Balanced outputs at various times would have gone through my Vioelectric HPA V281. This was in-house and would have fed the LTA Z10E for a while, and I hope to get back to the Z10E review here pretty soon. And then, let's see, what else? Lake People G111 Mark II, and yep, surely it would have been used with the Hi-Fi-Man Shangri-La Junior Energizer as well. Okay. So then, headphones that would have been heard with this in the single signal chain are, again, manifold. Sennheiser HD6XX, Beyerdynamic DT880 600 ohm, Focal Radiance, Hi-Fi-Man, so many Hi-Fi-Mans, but HE1000 SE, Susvara, HE6 SEV2, I'm sure there are others, that's enough for now. Okay, Focal Utopia, Erzatich Mania, what else was in there? Some of those E-stats that I did, like the Shangri-La Junior, which surely would have been through there and all that. For more critical listening here recently, I have gone mostly with the HE1000 SE, the Utopia, and the Radiance. Okay, just because I love those three headphones, and so I use them a lot for the testing here of this DAC. Oh, Susvara as well, if I didn't just say that one. So this thing had a chance with a lot of signal chains and, you know, a wide variety of price points on those signal chains too. Okay, so then what about the sound? So let me go ahead and address the oversampling versus non-oversampling here right out of the gate. I preferred the NOS mode on this one quite strongly, and so I used NOS, or non-oversampling, for pretty much all of the listening tests you're about to hear. The differences that I heard were, to me, the oversampling mode was a bit narrower in soundstage. It was a bit softer in overall presentation and detail retrieval and that sort of thing. And then not only was it a bit narrower a soundstage, it was a little bit less coherent in its imaging and its separation. It took on a little bit more of like a 3-blob spatial presentation, where left, center, and left, right were felt a little bit recessed compared to left, right, and center. So the center image in particular felt like it was pushed forward a little bit. On NOS mode, that really became more coherent in its spatial presentation. The soundstage widened. I felt like there was a little bit more detail retrieval and just more overall clarity to the sound in NOS mode. And then it was also just a more dynamic, just overall more engaging sound from the non-oversampling mode. So that's what I ran with for most of the testing here. All right, that said, what is the signature? Mostly neutral. The Bifrost Aries 2, which again, this is very closely related to, has a reputation for being a little bit on the warmer side. I did not really hear as much warmth coming from the Draco. So I'm going to say it's a little bit more close to true neutral in its perceived frequency response presentation. But it is rather smooth in its delivery. Like, it's almost never harsh or anything like that. It has some fun dynamics to it. It's not hugely slammy or anything like that, but like through the mids, you get some good snap on snare drums and that sort of thing. So it's got some fun dynamics to it and all of that. Now, it is a fairly large sound stager in NOS mode with some decent depth and layering to the sound as well. So you kind of get it in 3 dimensions there. So when I reviewed the Aries 2, the Bifrost Aries 2, like 3 years ago now, something like that. Okay, I was really struck by how well it's staged. The musician didn't stand out to me as being as strong in the sound stage, at least comparatively back then. But I will say that I think this price point of DACs, they've all kind of caught up to what the Aries 2 was doing in staging in that way. So like when I compared this, like the soundstage didn't stand out as much, but I think again, that's more the competition catching up, not that this has fallen off, okay, in that way. Okay, resolution is pretty decent. It's not standout, like you're not, I didn't come away thinking that this is the most resolving DAC at the price point, but I also did not think that it was lacking really in its detail retrieval or anything like that. So I came away with just the general thinking that in NOS mode and from the balanced output, this is just a really rock solid, well-balanced, strong performing DAC all around. Okay, so it was generally fairly well pleased with its sound. Again, from the balanced output, we'll get to that in just a bit here. Okay, and NOS mode, like I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty decent DAC here at $750. Now, why did I put that balanced output qualifier on it? Well, this DAC falls prey to the very common issue of DACs at this price point, and honestly many DACs that are 2-3 times the cost of this, where they are a true balanced design, and so they sound better from their balanced output than they do from their single-ended output. This one is no exception to that. In fact, I think the gap between balanced output performance and single-ended performance here is fairly pronounced. So even though the NOS mode helps with the overall performance of this DAC generally, what I just described to you in the the oversampling versus non-oversampling difference here from the balanced outputs is sort of true between the balanced output and the single-ended output. The single-ended output to me just sounds a little bit softer, less detailed, a little bit less coherent in its spatial presentation, with kind of that center image pushed forward a little bit, and just generally not as engaging or as active, just kind of a little bit flat and dull in comparison to the balanced output. And that was true whether we were in oversampling or non-oversampling mode. Okay, so this is an example of what I have been talking about a lot recently, where there is just kind of a dearth of quality single-ended DAC options anywhere near this price, and here again is an example of that in action. All right, let's do a couple of quick comparisons with other DACs near the price point. I am an owner of the Schiit Bifrost 2/64, which I have a review for, and I will link to that down in the description. I worked a lot doing A-B comparisons between the Bifrost 2 and the Musician Draco here. And from the comparing balanced output to balanced output, it was pretty close. I thought the Bifrost 2 had just a little bit more low-end presence, a little bit more slam to it as well, was overall just slightly more dynamic, ever so slightly more resolving. They were similar in width in their soundstage and in their soundstage size. I thought that the Bifrost 2 did just a skosh better on separating sonic images from each other. And I personally preferred the Bifrost's take on timbre. The Musician's timbre is in no way a weakness. It is reasonably good, but Schiit's house sound to me gets timbre pretty right, okay? And so they continue that with the Bifrost 2 and not this one. The Bifrost 2, again, it's $800. This is $750. So again, close in price. I think the Bifrost 2 is also significantly better performing from its single-ended output than the Musician is from its single-ended output. So that to me is another advantage that the Bifrost 2 has here at, near this price point is it's comfortably ahead of this one. So where balanced output versus balanced output is very, very close, and I just personally prefer the Bifrost 264 a little bit better, the single-ended versus single-ended output is just, to me, clearly in favor of the Bifrost, okay? However, the Bifrost has a stripped-down feature set compared to this one. It's going to top out at 24-bit, 192 kilobit PCM files. It has no DSD decoding in there. It also has only USB, optical, and coaxial digital inputs. All that. So the Musician is much more flexible in terms of what you can plug into it and what it can decode. And as long as you are using its balanced output, its performance is just like right there, just barely behind the Bifrost 2, in my opinion. Okay, so that's one comparison to look at. Another comparison that I have in right now is not an R2R DAC, but I have the SMSL VMV D1se DAC in, which is an alphabet soup of a name, okay? But that goes for about $720 US, I believe. It's an ESS Sabre chip Delta Sigma DAC. It has MQA on it, which this does not, but otherwise has, I think, pretty much all of the same decoding options on it, but it does not have an AES input like the Draco does. Okay, the SMSL also has a remote control and a preamp functionality where this has a fixed output. Okay, so the SMSL just has a little bit different feature set options in it as well. There, it's also a little bit smaller in footprint. The SMSL is a little bit brighter than this one in its presentation. Okay, it has a little bit more treble emphasis. It's not an ESS sharpness thing. It's just a little bit brighter. It's a well-controlled treble. It's just a little bit brighter on it there. I think the SMSL is also just a little bit better than from its single-ended output than the Musician is from its single-ended output. But the Musician has like that R2R DAC smoothness to it, where I think some might find the D1se to lean a little bit too aggressive for their tastes. I personally think that the D1se is probably the better overall DAC. Very, very close though, but it's going to come down to preference. Again, some people are just going to prefer the slightly bigger, smoother presentation of the R2R implementation here in the Musician, okay, than they are the D1se, and I can't blame them for that. Okay, what can we say then about the Musician Draco here? One, I think it has excellent connectivity options. I think it has that R2R ladder DAC smoothness. It has very good price appropriate sound. It is fairly neutral. It is smooth it is still fairly dynamic. It is a good sound stager. It has reasonably good spatial presentation, reasonably good detail retrieval, okay, and those sorts of things from its balanced outputs. If you need to use its single-ended outputs, there are better options at the price point. So that's something to keep in mind too. But it decodes just about everything but MQA too. So it has a good connectivity. It has a good feature set. From the balanced outputs, it sounds pretty good. Okay, so I'd say that it's a pretty rock solid DAC here at, in this mid-fi DAC category. Call it, $600 to $1,000 or so. Really strong performer. Okay, so if this sounds interesting to you, then yeah, please do check it out. Okay, and with that, I think I can wrap this review up. So, I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Musician Draco R2R digital to analog converter. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not, leave a comment down below. Please remember to check out my Patreon, where you can support me on a monthly basis and get some fun benefits like being able to talk to me on Discord and early access to reviews like this one. Okay, also, you can check out my PayPal. If a monthly subscription doesn't make sense for you, you can support the channel in that way. But as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.